Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today we're gonna jump into some malicious compliance. Our first story today comes to us from Epic Winter Wolf. My grandpa versus evil teacher. Let's jump right in. My grandfather has told me this story and I only recently realized it was malicious compliance, so I decided to share it. My grandpa is ambidextrous and liked to switch whatever hand he was writing with for the other when his hand got sore. Unfortunately, at the time, left-handed writing was seen as a sin. So if he ever used his left hand, he would get hit with a ruler. Fun times in the 1950s. One year in grade school, he got this really mean teacher who made her students write until their wrists hurt. She made them write long papers about things my grandpa can't remember. And every time she saw Grandpa give his right hand a break, she'd smack him on the head with a ruler. Now, my grandpa is a stubborn man, always has been, but he's also very clever. So the second he got the chance, he pulled what he likes to call the fast one over her. This one day his teacher had everyone write about something and told them that no matter what, she didn't want to see the pencils leave their right hand. My grandpa had a light bulb moment and decided to obey her to the letter. The teacher forced Grandpa's class to write until lunch before collecting their papers. Then, when everyone was eating, she made her rounds. Imagine the look of shock on her face when she saw my grandpa eating his sandwich with his left hand and still holding the pencil in his right. She screamed at him before smacking him with the ruler and telling him to eat properly. Grandpa tells me each time how much he struggled to not laugh when he had told her that she said that she didn't want to see the pencil leave his right hand. He was subsequently dragged to the office and had to sit through a lecture by the headmaster. But my grandpa remained stubborn and repeated that he had been told not to let the pencil out of his right hand no matter what. Grandpa was given classroom cleaning duty during recess as a punishment, but he still wouldn't let go of the pencil. He always laughs as he shows me the range of facial expressions his teacher would make because of his stubbornness, but Grandpa told me he just kept repeating her words of no matter what back to her. At the end of the day, Grandpa was sent home with a paper insisting upon a parental meeting over Grandpa's stubbornness and lack of respect for his teachers. Grandpa's dad, my great-grandpa Grampy, actually thought it was a riot, according to Grandpa, and would tell me about how Grampy laughed off the headmaster and teacher, telling them that his son did exactly what they told him. Not to mention that since teacher said no matter what, Grandpa has a right to hold on to that pencil. Grampy then treated Grandpa to sweets and told him to keep it up. Granny, great-grandma, almost pitched a fit according to Grandpa, until Grampy managed to compromise with her. Grandpa would only hold the pencil on school grounds. Grandpa told me that Granny still didn't approve, but decided to let them reap what they sow. It got really funny, as according to Grandpa, he came to school every day with the pencil in hand. It got better because eventually the pencil couldn't be used anymore due to all the excessive writing, but he remained stubborn about not letting the pencil go, given he was explicitly told no matter what. So he then started writing with his left hand, infuriating the teacher. But she was unable to stop him because he couldn't write with his right hand while holding the dead pencil. Grandpa said he got pretty popular at school and kept it up the entire year, driving all the teachers insane, according to him. He did stop holding the pencil on his last day of classes for that year, but kept writing with his left hand. To this day, he laughs over the fact that the staff at his school didn't notice until he left at the end of the day and waved bye to the mean teacher with his right hand. Grandpa always tells me that he's never heard someone pitch the degree of fit she had that day. I just love my amazing, stubborn, and crafty grandpa. I did a little bit of research on this one because I was curious. I'm a right-hander, never had issues with left-handed stuff, but apparently being left-handed and writing left-handed was completely discouraged until the mid-70s. I can't believe that. There's even a story in the comments about somebody whose grandmother used to tie their left arm to their side every day until they learned to do everything right-handed. I can't imagine that. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our second story today comes to us from Big Chip Donahue. All that over a couple jugs of water? Let's jump right in. Not my story, but my dad's from a couple years back. My dad was a dentist for just over 40 years in a small, tight-knit neighborhood tucked in a big city. He's no saint, but over the years he built up a reputation as a trusted professional who genuinely cared about doing good work. If someone couldn't pay, he'd let them pay later. Most of his patients were first-generation immigrants, and he learned a good amount of their language to help communicate with them. Suffice it to say, he was a pretty good dentist to have, that is, until he decided to retire. When the financial crisis hit in 08-09, my dad had been thinking about retiring for a while, but due to the market crash, he decided it would be better to wait it out a couple more years, early 60s, so he had some time. Then, in 2015, he decided enough was enough and he had to get out. Business was back up, but at his stage in life, it became just a constant headache running a dental practice, constantly worrying about his staff and his office. He needed out. Glossing over a whole saga of him sorting through the process of actually selling his business, around early 2016, he was able to strike a deal with a dental corporation to buy out his practice. Dental corporations seem to be the new age of dentistry, replacing individually owned practices with multiple offices, referring patients within the corporate structure. A bit sneaky, but it's business. These corporations pull a lot more shady stuff, but the offer they made my dad was a standard, we're buying everything and paying in full, then you work for us for 3 months and you're done. Easy, right? Day 1 of my dad's 3-month finale and things aren't looking great. They placed this new office manager called Sheila, who seems like she's never managed anything more than her iPhone. My dad, having managed his business for 40 plus years, starts asking if she's going to do X, Y, or Z, and all he gets in response is, "You're the dentist, I'm the manager. Don't you have teeth to look at?" Hoping that his office doesn't have to fall apart while he's still there, my dad asks his hygienist and front desk staff to go through the regular orders and such, even if the manager forgets. This keeps them afloat for a while. Then, one by one, the staff are beginning to be retrained. Sheila brings in new booking software even she doesn't know how to use, and the front desk can't figure it out. Bookings are a mess, orders are getting missed, and within a couple of weeks, 2 of them are let go for more competent replacements. My dad is not happy. The staff weren't protected, but they were from the neighborhood and were also part of the reason why the patients came to his office. Soon after, they fired one of the hygienists for being late for a 3rd time, which leaves only 1 left. All these staff are being replaced by people personally vetted by Sheila. Of course, they aren't familiar with the patients or the office, and things are going downhill fast. All the while, Sheila's barking orders at him, power tripping, thinking she's got him by the balls. They haven't found a replacement dentist yet, so they plan on bringing in dentists from a nearby office to fill in the day after he leaves, so no proper transition. Without another dentist, the only person who knows all the little quirks in the office is my dad, and the hygienist to a degree. At this point, my dad doesn't even care about the office. There was no way his patients would be taken care of here, so better for them to get started on finding somewhere better. It was my dad's last day that Sheila finally slipped. There were no patients booked for the afternoon, so my dad was planning on leaving the office early and getting a head start on his retirement. Sheila had other plans. She asked my dad, as one of her employees, to pick up some water for the operatory equipment, among other supplies that my dad usually had his assistants pick up. In my dad's head, this was a big middle finger to his long career as a dentist, and in that moment, something clicked in his head. He asked Sheila, "Just to clarify, you want me to get water, right?" Sheila was a bit confused, thinking he was being stupid, and replied, Yes, water in a bottle? You've been doing this for how long and you've never bought water?" To which my dad replied, "Well, I'm just the dentist and you're the office manager." Not wanting to risk breaching his contract or the sale of his office, my dad slipped my hygienist the order list, had her buy a bunch of jugs of water with other supplies, which she drove back to the office for him to bring inside, and started his beautiful journey of retirement. Little did Sheila know, operatory equipment is pretty delicate stuff, and for 40 years my dad has clearly instructed his staff to buy distilled water, as regular old water has a hefty amount of minerals which seriously damages dental equipment. According to the hygienist, the entire office went to a screeching halt since all the equipment was malfunctioning, and it took a week for Sheila and the new dentist to even figure out what was wrong. They had electricians come in before calling a service guy for the equipment, which makes no sense. They were already bleeding patients since none of them trusted the new management, and a week of cancellations was essentially a death sentence when it came to the regulars. The hygienist quit a couple weeks later from the abuse she was getting from the new staff, but it took a surprising 9 months for the office to close for good. I double-checked Sheila's LinkedIn profile, and she got promoted to dental assistant at another one of the corporation's offices. As for my dad, he was pretty bummed to see the whole thing crash and burn, but he was happy to help Sheila land a new job. It really had to hurt OP's dad seeing the business that they'd built up over 40 years just crash and burn like that, although they did get out and they got paid, so I guess it's not that bad. Our next story today comes to us from Strangelove's Chair. They're all the same, just grab me one. Let's jump right in. I'm a parts manager at a dealership that sells, among other things, parts for small engines. Think mowers, generators, snowblowers, etc. When customers come into the store looking for parts for small engines, we almost always need a model and a serial number of the engine in order to look up the correct fiche to get them the correct part. 8 out of 10 times the customer does not have this information, or they have the wrong information, the model of the mower, not the engine. Obviously, we'll try to help the customer to avoid them having to leave to get the info and then come back. We'll ask if they bought the equipment from us, or if it had been in for service, then the model might be in our system. Sometimes we're able to ask enough questions and get enough details to be able to make a good guess as to the part they need. Sometimes there is nothing we can do, and the customer has to go back to get the model number. When you ask for the model and serial number, most of the customers are understanding, but sometimes they utter the worst 5 words you can say to a parts person. Why? They're all the same. That's what Phil decided to do. Phil, a 50-year-old chip on his shoulder, contractor type, storms up to the counter and says he needs a carburetor for a water pump. Do you have the model and serial number? Phil huffs. Why? They're all the same. I start to reply, no sir, they're not all. He then starts to raise his voice, just short of yelling, and tells me he needs a carburetor. They're all the same. The job he's on is shut down until he gets this equipment fixed. I ask if the equipment had been here before. It hadn't. I explained to him that they're not all the same. There are thousands of different carburetors, and that he'll have more downtime if we get him the wrong part. He's not having any of it. He turns beet red and finally breaks and yells at me, "Just grab me an effing carb." You got it. I tell him I'll be right back. I go into the parts room to the very back corner where we keep old, obsolete stock that's been there for years, and I pick a very particular carburetor. This carburetor had been misordered a few years back. It fits one very particular engine, a very old engine, and because of that fact, it was the most expensive small engine carburetor we had. Most carburetors for small engines run $25 to $125. This puppy retails for $299.99 and had been an eyesore on my inventory numbers for quite a while. I bring it out to the counter and tell him the price. He scoffs and hands me his card. I explain our return policy on fuel-related items. They cannot be returned if fuel touches them. He doesn't really pay attention, pays for it, and leaves. 2 hours later, one of my coworkers grabs me from the back and says, "A customer is asking for the manager." I ask what's going on. Coworker explains that a customer is upset because he can't return a carb because there's fuel in it. I smile because I know who it is. I go up to the counter and see it's Phil. "This is the wrong carb. I need to return it." "I'm sorry, Phil. I thought you said they were all the same." He turns beet red again and just says he wants to return it. I look at the packaging. It's torn open and there is dirt all over it, but most importantly, it reeks of old gas. Why would he connect the fuel line to a carb that won't fit is beyond me. "I'm sorry, I can't accept this. It has fuel in it. I explained this when you purchased it." We go back and forth for a while and he eventually accepts defeat and just asks to buy the correct carb. I ask for the model and serial number and he still doesn't have it. He has to go and get it. He came back with the correct numbers. We sell him the correct carb. Ah yes, OP, what a wonderful way to get rid of that old stock inventory that you're just not able to sell to anybody else. Good thinking. Our last story today comes to us from DD2487. "Won't let me have my operation at a hospital 20 miles away. Fine, I'll spend a week at a hospital 4 hours away instead." Let's jump right in. This happened about 10 years ago, not long after I was diagnosed with endometriosis. I lived in the UK, so we luckily have the NHS. However, the rules can differ in different parts of the UK. At the time this malicious compliance occurred, I lived in North Wales, about 4 minutes from the border of England. With endometriosis, there are two different types of surgery you can have to remove it: excision and ablation. Excision is much more effective, but can only be performed by specialist surgeons at certain hospitals which are classified as accredited endometriosis centers. In order to be classed as one of these specialist centers, a hospital needs to perform a certain number of very complex surgeries each year, amongst other criteria. At this time, if you lived in England, you had a right to choose where you were treated. So if you had endometriosis and lived in, for example, Liverpool, but your local hospital wasn't an accredited endometriosis center, you could choose to have your surgery in Manchester instead. Wales had a similar rule, but you could only choose to be treated at another hospital in Wales. Doesn't sound too absurd in principle. However, Wales had one accredited center at the time, Cardiff, South Wales, and England had about 20. I'd already tried ablation surgery and it hadn't worked. I was in extreme pain every day and was getting to the point where I was unable to work or go to college. I went to see my GP to ask for excision surgery. I mentioned the right to choose, which I'd been told about, and asked if I could be referred to a specialist on the Wirral, which was a 20-minute drive away. I was told this wasn't possible as it was over the border in England, and that I could only choose from hospitals in Wales. Where I lived was so close to the border that the nearest big town was in England. Until the month before, I had worked in England every day. I crossed the border to England every time I went to do my weekly shop, but I wasn't allowed to go there for healthcare. The only specialist in Wales, as I mentioned, was in Cardiff, which was a 4-hour drive away. When I asked my not very good GP what else I could do as I needed the surgery, his reply was, "Not a lot unless you're willing to go to Cardiff for it." This is when I had my idea. I calmly turned around to the doctor and said, "Okay then." You see, the thing with excision surgery is, although it can take several hours and be a large operation, in most cases, they will let you go home the same day, as long as you have someone to collect you. So I calmly explained that yes, I'd be happy to travel to Cardiff. However, my dad couldn't drive that far, so I wouldn't have anyone to bring me home. This would mean they'd have to keep me in for up to a week, until I was well enough to take the train home, as opposed to sending me to the hospital 20 minutes from my house, where my dad could pick me up the same day. I got a call the next morning to say they'd approved my request to have the operation at the hospital just over the border. Ah yes, the typical, no, we can't break our rules for anything. Oh, wait, this is gonna cost us a bunch more money? Yeah, we can break our rules this time. Check out all 4 OPs in the description down below. Thanks for watching, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you in the next one.